It was just after sunrise in Malibu when the call came in. A hotel guest staying on the 5th floor of the Cliffside Resort and Spa, a sprawling 5-star estate nestled between the Pacific coastline and the mountains, called the front desk with an odd complaint. Not a request for more towels. Not a room service delay. The caller said, "There's something. I heard someone crawling. I think they're hurt." For the next 20 minutes, nothing happened. Staff assumed, perhaps, it was a guest under the influence. Maybe someone coming back from a late night at the pool bar, still dizzy, slipping in the hallway. These things happened. And at a resort like this, where celebrities came to disappear and tech millionaires came to detox, discretion was everything. No one rushed. Not yet. But by the time the staff finally arrived at the 4th floor, the hallway outside room 4223 was a crime scene. They just didn't know it yet. What they saw didn't look real. A young man, completely naked, lay twisted on the cold floor tiles. Blood had pooled beneath him and stretched in long smears all the way back to the open door of the room. His body was covered in gashes, on his chest, legs, even across his back. One arm was outstretched, like he had tried to crawl for help. His eyes were open, glassy. He was dead. The luxury carpet, once white and soft beneath designer heels, was soaked red. Inside the room, the silence was worse than the scene outside. Room 4223 was a corner suite, marble floors, ocean view, rainfall shower, in-room jacuzzi. A honeymoon favorite. But this morning it looked like something out of a war documentary. Glass shards on the floor. A tray of untouched room service. Blood spattered on the bathroom mirror. And there, in the tub, submerged in water now cooled from the night before, was the second body. A young woman. Also naked. Her head tilted back, her long black hair fanned across the water like ink. Her lips were slightly parted, foam still bubbling from her mouth. No one screamed. No one cried. The staff member simply stood frozen. A second later, they backed out of the room, called security, and locked the hallway down. That was the last morning Malibu Cliffside would feel like paradise. His name was Brandon Hale. Just 25 years old. Originally from San Jose, California. Self-made millionaire in cryptocurrency. Brilliant but private. The kind of guy who didn't go viral for being loud, but because his lifestyle quietly stunned people. Exotic cars. Rooftop dinners in Singapore. Swiss watches casually draped over the wrist of someone who used to bus tables at IHOP. Hers was Emily Tran. Barely 21. Originally from Dallas. A psychology major, class of 2024. Known for her bright laugh, humble attitude, and her Instagram, filled with travel photos and handwritten quotes. "Gentleness is strength," one of her captions read. Another said, "I fall in love with places more than people." They had met during a panel talk about fintech and mental health. A strange match, maybe, but a real one. For 2 years, they'd been inseparable. Always moving. Always posting. A dream life to anyone watching from the outside. Until that morning. When both were found dead, without a single witness. Police arrived just after 7 a.m. The hallway had already been cleared. The two bodies were formally declared deceased on site. An initial scan of the room revealed no sign of forced entry. The door lock logs showed only Brandon and Emily had accessed the room in the past 12 hours. No other card. No cleaning staff. Nothing. The resort's high-definition hallway cameras told a similar story. At 8:02 p.m. the night before, Emily was seen entering the lobby alone. She wore a flowing tan maxi dress, her hair down, small black suitcase in hand. She smiled at the front desk. Check-in under her name. Credit card swipe. Key card handed over. Room 4223. At 12:17 a.m., Brandon arrived. Fresh off a flight from San Jose. Surveillance showed him entering the lobby, dressed casually. Hoodie. Backpack. He didn't speak to anyone except the concierge. But when Emily came down to meet him, he lit up. A brief hug. A kiss on the cheek. Some whispered words. Then they took the elevator up together. The last time either of them would be seen alive. What happened next, no one knows for sure. At 1:20 a.m., room service delivered a tray of food, lobster risotto, 1 bottle of wine, creme brulee. The server reported nothing unusual. They seemed relaxed, he said later. Friendly. Like any couple. But something changed between then and sunrise. The official autopsy report later noted that Brandon had over 20 lacerations across his body, most shallow, but 2 critical, 1 near his neck, 1 behind his left thigh. The cause of death? Exsanguination. He bled to death. But the cuts weren't made by a knife. The wounds, as the report stated, were caused by jagged glass, likely from a shattered wine bottle. Emily's death was different. No lacerations. No deep wounds. But on her wrists, legs, and neck, there were bruises consistent with resistance. Her lungs contained water. Foam around her nose and lips. Forensic analysis confirmed it. She had been drowned in the bathtub while still conscious. There were no drugs or alcohol in either of their systems. Both were completely sober. Both knew exactly what was happening to them. And no one came to save them. Still, none of that answered the most haunting question of all. Why did Brandon crawl out of the room? If he had attacked Emily in a fit of rage, why wouldn't he end his life inside? Why the hallway? Why the trail of blood? Why the outstretched arm? Police investigators would later offer a theory. But not everyone would believe it. Not Emily's family. Not Brandon's friends. Not the thousands of people who followed their story online and watched it unravel in real time. Because something about room 4223 never added up. Something about that night in paradise felt like it had been planned. They were the kind of couple that made you stop scrolling. Photos of them always looked like stills from a movie. Him in a crisp linen shirt, leaning against a convertible on a coastal road, her barefoot on a yacht, hair catching golden light. Brandon Hale and Emily Tran seemed to live not just a life of privilege, but of impossible chemistry. Everything they touched looked effortless. To the outside world, they were #goals. But in stories like this, the surface always shines brightest right before the collapse. Brandon didn't grow up in Malibu or Silicon Valley. He came from the east side of San Jose, a stretch of California more known for auto shops and underfunded schools than for raising millionaires. Raised by a single father who worked night shifts at a warehouse, Brandon was the kid who kept to himself. Teachers remembered him as quiet, intense, brilliant with numbers. By the time he was 17, he was already mining Bitcoin on a second-hand laptop in a shared apartment. He didn't go to college. He didn't need to. By 22, Brandon was consulting on blockchain security for fintech startups. By 24, he had founded a boutique crypto hedge fund operating mostly under the radar, until a single tweet from a venture capitalist called him the future of decentralized trust. That tweet alone brought investors. Money flowed. And Brandon, once the invisible teenager, became one of crypto's youngest multimillionaires. He bought a penthouse in Los Angeles but rarely stayed there. Instead, he traveled. Nonstop. Japan. Iceland. Mexico City. A blur of private airports, rooftop parties, and curated retreats. That's where Emily Tran came in. Emily wasn't from that world. Not even close. She grew up in Garland, Texas, the daughter of Vietnamese immigrants. Her parents owned a small nail salon. She worked there on weekends. Her dream was to become a child psychologist. She earned a full ride to the University of Texas and was known around campus for her kindness, organizing charity drives, tutoring freshmen in biology, volunteering at the campus counseling center. Her world was books, coffee shops, and quiet ambition. Until a chance meeting changed everything. The two first met at a private panel discussion in Austin in late 2021. Brandon was a guest speaker. Emily had been invited as a student representative for a nonprofit focused on mental health in tech. According to friends, they didn't talk much during the event, but something clicked. He asked her to coffee afterward. She almost said no. She didn't follow finance. Didn't care for crypto. But Brandon was different. Disarming. Soft-spoken. A little awkward. Not at all the arrogant tech bro she expected. They exchanged numbers. From there, it was like gravity took over. Within 3 months, they were traveling together, Bangkok, Lisbon, Kyoto. Emily posted carefully curated snapshots to her Instagram. Brandon posted nothing. He preferred staying off-grid, despite his wealth. Still, people noticed. By spring 2022, online forums and Reddit threads were speculating about the mystery girl always seen with Hale, as his followers called him. But for the people who knew them, the relationship was real. Their friends, from both sides of their worlds, described it the same way: intense, gentle, a little whirlwind but sincere. They seemed happy. Genuinely happy. So when the headlines came in May 2023, tech millionaire and student found dead in Malibu hotel, the shock wasn't just in the tragedy. It was in the absolute lack of warning signs. Investigators tried to reconstruct their final days. What brought them to Cliffside Resort? Why were their flight paths different? Emily flew in first, from Austin, connecting through LAX. She checked in at 8 p.m., alone, using her name. Brandon didn't arrive until 4 hours later, flying in directly from a blockchain conference in San Jose. No one could explain why they didn't arrive together. No one could explain why Emily booked the room by herself. No social media post hinted at a breakup. No cryptic story. No strange status updates. If there had been a fight, no one heard it. If something was wrong, no one saw it. That's what made everything so difficult to accept. Emily's college roommate later told authorities that she had spoken to her the day before the trip. She seemed excited, the roommate said. Not nervous. Just like she was finally going to relax. Brandon, according to his assistant, had canceled 3 investor calls to take the trip. He said he was off-grid. That it was just for them. For a couple so public in the way they shared their love, their deaths were disturbingly quiet. But hindsight has a way of sharpening blurry lines. And in the weeks after the tragedy, people began revisiting old posts, rereading captions, watching videos they'd once double-tapped without thinking. One post on Emily's feed stood out. It was from a few months earlier. A photo of her looking out at the ocean from a villa in Tulum. The caption read, "Some waves pull you in. Others try to drown you." At the time, it was poetic. After May 2nd, it sounded like something else. In the next part of the story, we'll go deeper into the 24 hours leading to their deaths, the hotel footage, the room service receipt, and the quiet clues left behind by 2 people who may have sensed they were being followed. Because sometimes, luxury doesn't mean safety. And paradise has shadows no sun can touch. The security footage told a story. But like most stories captured through grainy hotel cameras and motion-triggered sensors, it didn't tell the whole truth. It was 12:17 a.m. when Brandon Hale stepped into the lobby of the Cliffside Resort, 4 hours after Emily Tran had checked in. He looked travel-worn, hoodie pulled over his head, black backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes shifting quickly between the front desk and the elevators. From the outside, nothing looked odd. But forensic analysts later flagged something subtle. His pacing. His posture. The way he stood not with exhaustion, but with hyper-awareness. One investigator said, he looked like someone who was either being watched or thought he was. Footage showed Emily coming down to meet him just minutes later. Their embrace was short, familiar, but subdued. No kisses. No long gaze. Just a smile and a brief exchange. Then together, they took the elevator to the 4th floor. Room 4223. That elevator ride, silent, 22 seconds long, was the last time they were both seen alive. What happened next was pieced together from fragments. At 1:20 a.m., a room service staffer arrived with their late-night order, 2 lobster risottos, a bottle of wine, and a small dessert tray. He knocked. Brandon answered. The staffer described nothing unusual. They seemed mellow, he later recalled. Maybe tired, but nothing weird. He left. The door closed. End of interaction. The wine bottle later found shattered in the bathroom wasn't opened at that time. It was still corked. And neither Brandon nor Emily had any alcohol in their system at autopsy. That was one of the first unsettling details. The room service receipt would later be time-stamped and confirmed. No irregularities. No signs of forced entry. No tampering. No one else entered or exited the room according to the door's electronic log. The hallway cameras confirmed that. From the moment Brandon and Emily walked in, to the moment Brandon crawled out 5.5 hours later, no one else appeared. That's the part investigators leaned on. No signs of a third party. No stolen items. No outside fingerprints. No DNA not belonging to Brandon or Emily, the police report stated. To the LAPD, the conclusion was simple: this was a closed-room case. But that simple explanation quickly started falling apart. Let's rewind. At 6:31 a.m., a guest staying on the floor above called the front desk to report unusual thumping and scraping noises. The caller never said it was urgent. No screams. No crash. Just disturbing sounds. Something not quite right. Hotel protocol dictated they respond within 5 minutes. It took over 20. By the time staff arrived, Brandon was already dead. Face down in a pool of blood, just outside the room. The employee who found him later told reporters off the record, it was like he had been trying to write something in blood. There were smudges. Like marks. Not letters. Just desperation. Inside the room, Emily was found in the bathtub. The water had gone cold. But there was foam, a lot of it, still floating on the surface, clinging to her lips and the sides of the tub. There were no wounds on her body. Just bruises around her neck, wrists, legs. Classic signs of struggle. Her fingernails were cracked. Her lower arms reddened from repeated motion. The coroner concluded she had been submerged multiple times. Not held down in one prolonged drowning, but repeatedly pushed under, allowed to surface, then pushed again. A slow, terrifying death. The kind someone would inflict to make a point. Brandon's death was messy. His body had over 20 lacerations, some deep, others shallow. But here's what raised red flags. Multiple wounds on his back. Not shoulders. Not sides. Lower and mid-back. One investigator, speaking anonymously, said, "You don't stab yourself in the back like that. Not more than once. Not with jagged glass." And then there was the hallway crawl. Surveillance footage showed Brandon stumbling out of room 4223 around 6:20 a.m. Blood on his hands, feet, mouth. Completely naked, but still conscious, barely. He collapsed 3 times before reaching the edge of the hallway. He reached out, toward nothing, toward the air, as if he expected someone to be there. Then he stopped moving. If he had attacked Emily in a rage, why crawl for help? Why not end it in the room? Why not lock the door? Why not try to flee? The official story didn't line up. Not even close. That's when people started asking about the balcony. Room 4223 had a private balcony facing the ocean. The hotel confirmed it was not covered by security cameras due to privacy regulations. The balcony was shielded by a high railing, but accessible from neighboring rooms with some effort. And that's when theories began to swirl. Could someone have entered through the balcony when Brandon and Emily were in the bathtub? Could the attacker have waited, watched, and then struck when they were most vulnerable? It might explain the state in which they were found. It might explain why the wine was unopened. Why the room wasn't trashed. Why there was no forced entry. It might explain why Brandon crawled out. Not because he was guilty, but because he was the last one left alive, and he didn't want to die alone. But the LAPD didn't buy it. They closed the case 14 days later with one line: murder-suicide due to personal conflict. Case closed. No charges filed. No further suspects investigated. No follow-up interviews. It was over. Except for the families. Except for the internet. Because no one was ready to forget what the cameras missed. Not yet. In crime scene analysis, wounds speak louder than words. They tell you who fought, who fled, who broke. But sometimes, they also whisper the one truth no one wants to admit. That what's on paper doesn't match what's real. Brandon Hale had 22 lacerations on his body. That number stuck with the forensic examiner. Not because it was the highest he'd seen, but because of where they were. The official autopsy listed 2 deep lacerations, one across the inner thigh, another on the left side of the neck. 8 shallow cuts on the torso and abdomen. 4 on the arms, primarily defensive. 3 on the lower legs. 5 on the back. That last detail stopped everything. Because the back is nearly impossible to reach with force, especially if you're holding broken glass. According to the LAPD's narrative, Brandon had murdered Emily in a fit of rage, then turned the violence inward, self-inflicted wounds, culminating in him crawling out to die in the hallway. But self-inflicted back wounds? A suicide doesn't involve carving your own back with shards of a wine bottle. Unless you're a contortionist. Or unless someone else did it. The report also noted something else: no hesitation wounds. Hesitation wounds, shallow, trial cuts common in suicides, are usually found near wrists or the lower abdomen, especially when the weapon is makeshift, like glass. But Brandon's cuts were erratic, angled. Some looked like tearing, not slicing. The glass used had likely broken unevenly. It wasn't sharp, it was jagged. The medical examiner wrote, wound pattern inconsistent with known self-infliction behavior. Multiple injuries suggest panic movement or struggle, rather than controlled application of force. In layman's terms, these weren't the kind of cuts you make on purpose. They were the kind someone suffers while trying to get away. The most compelling physical evidence came from Brandon's left hand. Under his fingernails were fine glass particles, embedded deep, along with torn skin. At first, it was dismissed as transfer from holding the broken bottle. But then came a microscopic discovery. The angle of insertion suggested the shards weren't from gripping the bottle, but from grabbing something already broken, something being used against him, as if he had tried to pull it away. That alone introduced a possibility no one in law enforcement wanted to entertain: that Brandon Hale wasn't the attacker. He was a victim, just like Emily. And then there was the blood trail. The hallway where Brandon was found told a story of pain, but also of intention. He hadn't stumbled randomly. He had crawled in a straight line. To the elevator. But to escape? To be seen? To leave proof? Investigators couldn't agree. But one thing was undeniable: he didn't collapse immediately. Surveillance footage showed him conscious for over 15 minutes after leaving the room. That doesn't match someone who just finished a calculated double killing. It fits someone who's trying to survive. Then came the strangest part of the forensic review. The wine bottle, the alleged murder weapon. It was found shattered in the bathroom. Emily's fingerprints were on it. Brandon's were not. Not even partial prints. Not on the base. Not on the neck. Not on the shards recovered near his body. The LAP chalked it up to sweat, blood, water, loss of usable prints. But fingerprint analysts disagreed. They said it was highly unlikely that someone would use a bottle to harm themselves that extensively and leave no trace of touch. The bottle, in contrast, had clear palm smears from a female hand. So whose weapon was it really? Emily's cause of death was officially listed as asphyxia due to forced submersion. But even that phrasing felt clinical. Detached. Cold. What actually happened, according to the coroner, was far more brutal. She was pushed underwater multiple times, forcibly. She had fought. Her broken fingernails, bruises on her inner forearms, and muscle fiber tears in her neck all showed intense struggle. She hadn't passed out quickly. She had drowned over minutes, awake, aware, and terrified. This wasn't an impulsive act. This was deliberate cruelty. And yet, no signs of forced entry. No foreign DNA. No unknown fingerprints. The door never opened, according to the logs. No one was seen on camera. No alarm was tripped. So again the question returned. How did someone enter that room without being seen? That's when attention turned, again, to the balcony. Room 4223 had a wraparound glass balcony with direct exposure to the ocean-facing side. A narrow ledge separated it from the neighboring suite. A catwalk technician was brought in to test whether it was physically possible for someone to cross between balconies undetected. The answer? Not easy, but possible. At night, with gloves and some agility, a person could swing across, crouch low, and enter, if the sliding door had been left unlocked. And according to the crime scene report, to us, the LAPD still refused to reopen the case. But private investigators hired by Brandon's family weren't satisfied. They pointed out the unlocked balcony door, the missing fingerprints, the shallow wound patterns, the lack of motive for Brandon to kill the woman he planned to propose to in a month. They began building a different picture. A forced entry from the balcony. A violent confrontation. Emily drowned first. Brandon tortured, possibly interrogated. The killer escaped the way they came in. The LAPD, unwilling to admit lapse or scandal, closed the case to preserve the hotel's image and their own. Was it a stretch? Maybe. But it made more sense than a tech millionaire with no history of violence suddenly turning into a murderer. Because when you looked close enough, it wasn't just the cuts that didn't fit the story. It was everything. By the time Brandon Hale's autopsy report was made public, the headlines had already moved on. News cycles are fast. Even deaths that make the front page today are buried under celebrity scandals and political chaos by tomorrow. But in online forums, crypto communities, and dark little corners of the web, Brandon's name hadn't disappeared. In fact, it was just beginning to resurface. Not as a victim, not as a killer, but as something else entirely. A man with secrets. Before Malibu, Brandon Hale wasn't a household name, but in crypto circles, he was what they called a ghost whale. That is, someone with no big public profile, no flashy media coverage, no TED Talks. But behind the scenes, a person who moved millions. He had wallets, cold and hot. He had smart contracts that routed assets across multiple chains. He had backdoor access to Ethereum testnets. And more importantly, he had clients, some of whom didn't want to be found. According to his closest associates, Brandon wasn't just managing his own money. He was laundering money for others. The first real clue came from an anonymous Reddit post 2 weeks after the case was closed. The user, under the name CryptoRonin47, shared, "I used to work with Hale in 2021. He was clean until he wasn't. There was a cold wallet address linked to an offshore casino coin scam. Millions moved in 48 hours, then ghosted. Hale's fingerprints were all over the smart contract. No way to verify it. But within hours, blockchain sleuths went digging. They found a series of transactions tied to a string of shell companies, based in Malta, then Seychelles, then Singapore. The common thread? All of them passed through wallets controlled by a single, unverified identity with a San Jose IP address. Time-stamped just months before Brandon's death. One of Brandon's former interns, who requested anonymity, told a YouTube crypto investigator. He stopped trusting banks. Said wire transfers were traceable. Everything had to go through DeFi tunnels. He started talking in code. Like really paranoid. At the time, everyone chalked it up to success. Paranoia, after all, is part of the game when you handle digital fortunes. But now, it sounded more like fear. And then there was the London project. According to leaked investor documents, Brandon had been working on a confidential initiative codenamed Keystone. The project? A decentralized escrow protocol that could bypass third-party verifiers. It was powerful. Too powerful. Especially for those who benefited from lack of transparency in crypto. Insiders said Brandon had refused 2 offers to sell the source code. One offer came from a group in Zurich. The other, unconfirmed, was rumored to be from an entity operating through Dubai. Both were rejected. After that, Brandon started changing his behavior. He moved out of his LA penthouse. He started paying cash for flights. He took long detours before arriving at meetings. He even stopped attending crypto conferences altogether. And he told his assistant something chilling. If anything happens to me, don't touch the vault. Let it burn. No one knew what he meant. Not then. Emily, according to friends, didn't know the full picture. She wasn't part of the business. She'd asked once about all the coin stuff, and Brandon reportedly brushed it off. She thought it was just tech jargon, one roommate said. She had no idea. But some believed she might have seen something she shouldn't have. An email. A phone call. A message left open. If Brandon had been moving money for dangerous people, even unintentionally, then Emily, by simply being close, became a liability. Or worse, leverage. And that brings us back to Malibu. According to resort logs, the suite Brandon and Emily stayed in had been booked last minute, but not by Brandon. The reservation was made under Emily's name, through a burner phone IP traced to a proxy server in Sacramento. But why would Brandon, paranoid, careful, off-grid, let someone else book? Unless he wasn't the one who planned it. There's another theory. Darker. One that no official agency has acknowledged. That Brandon and Emily were lured to the resort. That someone knew exactly where they would be. That the unlocked balcony door was not an accident, but an invitation. What if Brandon's death wasn't just a result of financial fallout, but a message? One meant for others in the crypto underworld? Because when a man like Brandon dies with no assets missing, no wallets drained, and no tokens stolen, yet still ends up tortured and bled dry, that's not a robbery. That's a warning. What makes this story terrifying is not just that two people died brutally in a luxury suite. It's that no one took anything. Not the laptop. Not the phones. Not the flash drives. All digital wallets were left untouched. As if the goal wasn't to steal what Brandon had, but to punish him for ever having it. You'd think a 5-star hotel would have answers. That a place like Cliffside Resort and Spa, a coastal jewel of Malibu, known for its marble floors, signature concierge service, and $2,000 per night suites, would be equipped with every security measure money can buy. But what investigators found was silence. Not just the kind you expect in a luxury resort, but the kind that hides things. It started with the cameras. The LAPD requested full security footage from the hotel the morning Brandon Hale and Emily Tran were found dead. At first, management complied. Footage from the front entrance. Footage of the 4th floor hallway. Footage of the lobby elevator. But then came a gap. 16 minutes of missing footage. From 4:07 a.m. to 4:23 a.m., the timeframe forensic analysts believed Brandon sustained his deepest wounds. The hallway camera on the 4th floor had gone dark. The hotel claimed a routine system reboot. But when tech consultants reviewed the system's log files, there was no scheduled reboot. The camera had simply stopped recording. It was the first red flag. The second? No footage from the balcony side of the building. That wasn't surprising. Most hotels protect guest privacy in ocean-facing suites. But when asked about external perimeter logs, motion sensors, access records to maintenance catwalks, rooftop alarms, Cliffside Resort said, "We are not required to monitor those systems 24/7. Strange, for a resort catering to VIPs, celebrities, and visiting diplomats. Even stranger, the balcony of room 4223 shared a partial barrier with room 4225, a suite that had been vacant for 3 nights. Or so they claimed. No staff member could provide the check-in log. No cleaning record existed. The keycard activity showed 0 use. But the minibar had missing items. The towels had been used. And the bed, though remade, had signs of disturbance. It looked like someone had been there. Someone who never went through the front desk. The hotel denied it. Of course they did. But then came the story from Aaron, a junior bellhop working the overnight shift. He spoke to a local blogger off the record. His account was brief, but unsettling. "We got a noise complaint at like 6:30. But instead of going straight up, the night manager told us to wait for clearance. Said it might be a guest having a mental episode. Said we didn't want to cause a scene if it was someone important." Aaron also said the manager left the security office unattended for nearly 30 minutes during that time. When asked where he went, the answer was vague. To check something in the east stairwell, the manager claimed. But the stairwell cameras? Also inactive. And here's where things get darker. Less than 4 hours after the LAPD cleared the scene, a team of third-party cleaners arrived. By 1:30 p.m., the entire 4th floor hallway carpet had been replaced. Blood? Gone. Stains? Gone. Every trace of what happened that morning, erased before the press ever arrived. When asked why they acted so quickly, hotel representatives said, "We could not allow disturbing visuals to remain in view of other guests." The floor was nearly full that night. Legally, that excuse worked. Emotionally, it didn't. Emily's family was livid. Brandon's lawyer, who had only been contacted about estate matters, was suddenly filing requests to preserve remaining CCTV footage, emails between hotel staff, and internal communication logs. But by then, much of it had already been overwritten. A digital coincidence. A PR convenience? Or something more? One investigative reporter pointed out a pattern. In the past 5 years, 3 other mysterious incidents had occurred at Cliffside Resort. None were as violent, but all shared common elements. Last-minute suite reservations under female guests' names. Surveillance gaps between 3 o'clock and 5 a.m. Quick post-incident cleanups. Norris. 2 cases involved overdoses. One involved an unconfirmed guest fleeing through a fire escape. None made headlines. Until now. Rumors began to spread, especially in crypto circles, that Cliffside wasn't just a luxury resort, that it was a soft venue, a place where people of influence, power, or shadowed wealth could carry out negotiations or settle disputes without legal interference. Maybe it was just urban legend. Maybe people needed someone to blame. But there was one thing everyone agreed on. The hotel had been too quiet, too slow, too evasive, too clean. Emily's older brother, during a private interview, said something that stuck. When I saw that place on the news, the white tiles, the ocean view, the glass balconies, I thought, this is where rich people come to relax. But now, I think it's where some of them come to disappear. Brandon Hale bled to death trying to crawl out of a room no one entered. Emily Tran drowned in a bathtub no one approached. No weapons were recovered. No arrests were made. And the hotel? Still open. Still glowing. Still silent. There are moments, tiny fragments of time, that rewrite everything we thought we knew. For Brandon Hale, that moment was 6:19 a.m. on the morning of May 2nd. It was captured by one of the hallway cameras on the 4th floor of Cliffside Resort. A clean, silent frame. Time-stamped. Blurry around the edges. But unmistakable in what it showed. Brandon. On his hands and knees. Crawling. His body looked broken. There was blood on his shoulder, his face, his knees, the tiles beneath him. His left leg dragged. His right hand slipped. He stopped, rested against the wall, then tried again. That frame, just 11 seconds long, was enough to silence even the skeptics. Because no matter what theory you believed, no matter who you thought was responsible, you couldn't watch it and feel anything but horror. This wasn't a man who had just murdered someone he loved. This wasn't a killer. This was a man trying to survive. The camera captured him crawling approximately 14 feet down the corridor before collapsing completely. He tried once more to push up, but his arms gave out. His hand reached out. Not toward a weapon. Not toward a door. But toward the elevator. To escape. To call for help. To leave a trail someone could follow. The hotel staff wouldn't reach him for another 17 minutes. By then it was too late. Brandon Hale bled out on the floor of a luxury hotel hallway, less than 10 feet from safety. Inside the room, Emily Tran's body remained in the bathtub, submerged in cold water, the foam long dissipated. 2 lives. Gone. Not because someone wanted their money. Not because of an argument. But because something darker had entered that room, something no camera recorded, no sensor tracked, and no police report acknowledged. There was one more clue. A note. Found tucked inside Brandon's passport, inside the front sleeve. It wasn't found during the initial sweep. It wasn't labeled evidence. It was a page torn from a journal. Written in Brandon's handwriting. Just one line. Not all exits are doors. That was it. No context. No signature. No date. But to Brandon's family, it meant everything. To them, it was a message. A whisper. A final attempt to leave truth behind in a world full of polished lies. Today, the official report still lists the cause of death as Emily Tran, homicide by forced submersion. Brandon Hale, self-inflicted exsanguination. Case status, closed. No suspects. No indictments. No further investigation pending. But for those who followed the case, for the ones who watched every interview, read every leaked forensic detail, and replayed the hallway footage over and over, it isn't over. They remember how quiet the hotel was. How fast the blood was scrubbed away. How no one ever explained the missing footage. How a man bled out alone in the hallway of a place built for luxury. They remember how convenient the story sounded. And how inconvenient the evidence became. For Emily's family, there's no peace. Her mother still writes letters to the Malibu district attorney's office every month. Still pleads for reinvestigation. Still waits for a call that never comes. For Brandon's brother, there's only fury. He wasn't perfect, he said in a podcast interview. But he didn't do this. Someone did. And they're still walking free. The Cliffside Resort? Still operating. Room 4223 has been remodeled. New paint. New flooring. Same ocean view. Guests sip champagne on the balcony. They don't know what happened there. Or maybe they do. And they just don't want to know. What's left is silence. Not the peaceful kind. But the kind that weighs on you. Like a body you're not allowed to bury. Because Brandon Hale didn't die in a blaze of criminal guilt. He died crawling toward the truth. And Emily Tran didn't die in a lover's quarrel. She died screaming into water while someone watched her drown. The last crawl wasn't just a death. It was a message. And someone out there heard it.